Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 o'clock, and you are joining us here in our ECCMID TV studio live from the Bella Center here at the 33rd ECCMID in Copenhagen, Denmark. My name is Judith Cohen. I am your TV host here at ECCMID TV, and it is time for our next interview. And joining me here live in the studio today, this afternoon, is no less than the president of ESCMID Society, Annelies Zinkernagel from Zurich, Switzerland. Welcome, Annelies.
Hello.
Great that you found the time in your obviously very busy schedule to come here and talk to us and to our viewers
My
a little
pleasure.
bit about your activities, not just as the ESCMID president, but also within the scientific program. So that's really great that we get the time to pick your brain a little bit on some of the topics. So we're almost halfway through day 2 of the ECCMID. I can imagine you've already been places, followed a number of sessions. And to start with, I think you attended or even spoke at the high-level AMR meeting, which was a collab meeting between ESCMID and the Global Leaders Group, just before the Congress started, right, on Friday?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, how was it?
It was fantastic. It was the first time we forged a partnership between policymakers, and scientists, and I think it worked well. We had great discussions. The audience was great, participating with many questions. We had people coming from all different angles of the world with different backgrounds discussing the problem of antimicrobial resistance in different contexts. Problems we encounter in Europe, in the US, in India, how do we deal with it? And I think the lively discussion that resulted out of it will bring us forward in the future. It's all about communication, how we formulate things, and I think really forging this dialogue between policymakers, scientists, and clinicians is the way to go ahead. So it was great.
Yeah. Forging sounds like it costs a lot of trouble or effort to get to this place. Is that your experience?
Well, I think during COVID-19, we learned that it's extremely important to share knowledge nationally, internationally, amongst scientists, clinicians, and policymakers. Before, that was not something we did that easily, and I think we really have to improve our way of communicating, but also educating people in general and discussing these topics and not just keeping it in an ivory tower. And so I think forging in a way is probably the right way of putting that, because it does cost us all a bit of effort to move it forward. And so I think this was a really great setup meeting to start this dialogue, and I hope in the future it won't be forging, but really facilitating or other ways to put it.
And
Absolutely.
there's a large sense of urgency on this topic also, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yesterday morning at day 1 of ECCMID, you started off really early, I think chairing a symposium, or were you speaking at it? The difficult to treat infections on biofilms.
I had the honor to talk at that symposium. It was fantastic. It was an 8:30 meeting, the first one, and the room was full. So the crowds have been incredible. There's been a lot of enthusiasm, and really the rooms have been full. People have been coming.
Wow.
As just shown yesterday evening, we had 15,777 attendees enrolled. And it's been a tremendous success so far.
Huge,
so
right?
You see people smiling, happy to attend. So although we all say COVID has passed, I think we're still in this situation where we all feel privileged to be able to interact in person with each other and not doing this via the screens, but really interacting and being present.
COVID is not forgotten yet.
Not quite. And so the session was on difficult to treat infections. Was on pathophysiology. How do infections in the host behave? Why are they so difficult to treat, even if the bacteria we're testing for are totally susceptible to all the antibiotics? So yesterday we were not talking about the problem of AMR, antimicrobial resistance, but it was really the problem of how do we treat fully susceptible bacteria? How can we get them get the host rid of them. And one of the problems is these bacteria are hiding inside of biofilms and abscesses.
Yeah.
So they're not readily accessible to the antibiotics, even if the antibiotics are tested fully susceptible.
Yeah.
So that just shows that we really have the big problem of antimicrobial resistance, but even if they're susceptible, we sometimes have difficulties treating. And so there were beautiful talks from various people. One was on that these communities in the biofilms are not only due to one bacterial species, but often different species, and that they help each other out and make even stronger biofilms. Another talk was on that single cells give birth to new cells, and that those single cells adhere and cause the infection to go on. And then the last talk was on that even bacteria we think reside extracellularly outside the host cells are quite adept at residing inside the host cells. And again, the antibiotics don't always reach there.
Yeah.
And so we have difficulties treating. So it was a good start. And it was on pathophysiology and understanding bacterial infections. And it just shows the breadth we have here at ECCMID, pathophysiology, diagnostics, treatment. It's a great menu.
All divisions. And are they still at the start of learning the pathophysiology of why these infections are so difficult to treat? Or are there already ideas about solutions, how to target a biofilm, or...
There are some ideas, but they're not quite ready to be taken into the patient setting. So it's all still very experimental. There's more and more interest because we're actually implanting more material into the patients. Patients are getting older, which is beautiful, but then they also need more implanted material like pacemakers or hip replacements. And so we see more and more of these foreign body associated infections. And so the topic will remain timely and extremely important to find solutions, but we're not quite there.
Yeah, working on it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was yesterday morning. So if people want to look it back, they can also, everything is on demand available after the Congress also. So that's a really great thing about having a hybrid Congress. Yesterday evening was the official opening of the 33rd ECCMID, or the opening ceremony. I had the great pleasure to be allowed to introduce you, and this is where you also gave up the updated numbers on how many attendees are here at this ECCMID, which is a new record, I understood. You also presented some data on ESCMID, as you are the president now. And also that you presented a new strategy for ESCMID. Would you care to share the content of that strategy?
Happy to do so. So we defined our new strategy, which is taking up a lot of things we've already done, but formulated it a bit more precisely. One is clearly the problem of antimicrobial resistance, and so that went very well in line with our GLG ESCMID AMR meeting. We're also looking, and that's also something we've learned from COVID-19, emerging infections are everywhere. We just had Mpox, we had COVID-19. It's extremely important that we find ways to communicate and guide patients, but as well as physicians, if a new emerging infection comes up. So we're trying to strengthen those avenues quite a bit in the future. And another topic we see extremely important is education, training, and putting forward guidelines. So we're really here also to set up a new stage of education for our community. So it will be great. Another special topic yesterday was that it was 40 years of ESCMID. And so ESCMID started 40 years ago, and we had the great privilege of seeing and introducing the first president of ESCMID who came on the stage, and so that was fantastic. And it just shows that from a vision, I have a dream of 10 friends in a garden trying to merge clinical infectious diseases and infectious diseases, where we are now with this huge attendance rate and the enthusiasm. It's great.
Yeah, for me it was wonderful. I was there also to see how that resonated within the huge audience of over 2,000 people that were attending the opening ceremony. Yeah, the whole symbolism of the first president and you as the 40 years later, and how the society has grown
Yeah.
and the ECCMID has grown. It was a wonderful moment, I think, for ESCMID and ECCMID. On the topic of having a strong scientific society as backing you in everything that you do, tomorrow, is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
I think tomorrow, yes, you will be involved in a keynote scientific interview as well. And that is a little bit, if I understand it correctly, but please correct me if I'm wrong. It's a little bit on how the advocacy nationally, globally, locally, on all kinds of levels can inform the public. So how do we debunk fake news? How can we increase or enhance that there are changes in legislation? So how do you get the strength together from the society?
Yes, yes. So it will be a dialogue and an interview with the IDSA president. And we sort of will be focusing exactly on these topics about communication.
Yeah.
Where are we going in academia? How can we get people interested in academic work, in societal work? How can we use the societies, and how can the societies work together in order to inform public? I think the dialogue will be extremely interesting because the US, that's one country, a large country, but they have the same policy, the same rules, while in Europe we have many countries with many rules and different takes. And we saw also during COVID how that makes communication much more difficult. In the US, they had a very straight line also with the CDC, where they could always communicate the same guidelines, whereas in Europe, every country was doing it very differently. If we compare how Switzerland, Sweden did it to France, for example, very different avenues. And that just shows why communication is so important, but also to learn from other societies how they went through the pandemic and how we can build on this for the future. So it will be a good discussion. I'm looking forward to that.
Is it necessary to really focus on topics like this? Like, is the communication not there where you would like to have it?
We saw during COVID-19, we can never communicate enough. And
True.
we have to learn to communicate clearer, with clearer messages, I think. And I do think scientists and clinicians have to be involved in communicating with the public to inform them. Because if we don't translate findings or explain things, we cannot expect that people will move forward.
And find the right language to do so.
Yes, exactly. So I do think communication is a big topic, and it's not only with the general population, as we were saying before, also with policymakers. It's different ways of formulating something. What we saw during COVID-19 is that we very successfully managed to convince people about basic hygiene measures. So that is something everybody took up again. Social distancing was another topic, and droplet precautions with masks. Everybody worldwide was using the masks. So clearly, there's ways of communicating, but we could probably be a bit more efficient, and that's something to look into the future.
So your counterpart in the discussion at the keynote scientific interview is from the IDSA. Do you feel there will be a little bit of rivalry that we're doing it better, or
not at all?
No,
we
it's
have
really towards.
We have a very good relationship, a lot of discussions, and that will definitely not be about rivalry, but really something
it's really
togetherness.
about strengthening.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much, Annelies, for taking the time and giving us just a little bit more info on all of your activities during this ECCMID. I wish you the very best further.
Many thanks.
Of your
It was
ECCMID.
a pleasure being here.
Thank you so
very
much.
Enjoy ECCMID.
Thank you. For our viewers, if you would like to attend the keynote scientific interview, it will be tomorrow on Monday from 2:45 to 4:45 in Hall A. So then you know where to be. We are going to go offline for just a bit. We will be back at 2:00 sharp, and we will be welcoming our next guest, who is Monica Slavin from Melbourne, Australia, one of the keynote speakers. So tune in and get to hear with us what the in-depth or what the topic will completely be about. So that should be interesting. We hope to see you again at 2 o'clock.